I tried giving things an honest shake, a fair shot, just see how the Trump administration would play out, but it's been but not even a month, and America's getting what they deserve at this point. That's the stance I'm taking from here on out. You're getting what you deserve. Um, if America's suffering at this point, they deserve it. If America's getting vilified by the world, they deserve it. Canada is now an enemy of America. Our national anthem gets booed anytime it's played at any sporting event that's held in Canada right now. And it's astonishing. I would say it's surprising, but this is why I told you not to vote for this guy. And I know that there's going to be people out that are just going to agree with everything this guy does. That's the nature of politics, and I'm not sparing a second of my time thinking I'm going to change your mind. But I feel the worst for Ukraine in all this, because last night Donald Trump said those words that I don't know if I want to say I doubt his mental sanity, because I think what he's saying is actually calculated and deliberate. That that Ukraine started this war, like that those words actually came out of his mouth. Like Ukraine started this war, and they could have just cut a deal, and that would have stopped all this bloodshed from happening. They could have cut a deal to give up their sovereign land, just hand it over to Russia. Hey, no one would have died. That is the tact and stance that the Trump administration is taking right now. It's over for Ukraine. As far as future support, I'm not saying that like they're not going to exist as a country, because there is a bit of optimism I have for that still. It's going to get to the point where if Ukraine doesn't agree to any sort of deal that, get this, Russia and America broker for them, because yeah, Ukraine isn't involved in this process right now. America is doing it for them with the person that invaded them, Russia. Make sense of that. Europe, it's time for you to step up now. And I do understand some of the frustration, if you will, the resting on the laurels of America to police the world. And maybe that was one of Europe's biggest downfalls in all of this, because they sat there and said, hey, America's an ally of us. They'll have our back. If an evil, encroaching, imperialistic power tries to sway its weight at any point of existence on the planet right now, America will have our back, because they are the bastion of democracy. That's clearly not the case anymore with the Trump administration, because all this could have been avoided in Ukraine if they would have just cut a deal. If a democratic nation would have just cut a deal with an imperial power like Russia and just given up their land. How can you call yourself a democracy and the administration that's controlling your country stands on those words? How? So Europe, Ukraine, you can't rely on America right now. You can't trust America right now. Are you crazy? And going back to what I said is I understand some of the frustrations here, in that America does end up being the policeman of the world, and that can get annoying. And seeing that we are the ones that have to pay the most out of pocket to finance our Department of Defense. I can tell you, I, as a taxpayer, I'm not thrilled with the amount of money. People want to say, like, why doesn't America give more? Like, as a taxpayer here in this country, I see what my country pays out of their takes out of the Americans' pockets to afford the Department of Defense industry that is the world police force. Like, why should that all be on America? So I understand the bubbling of frustration there, And Trump does have a genuine point saying, like, Europe, you need to carry your weight more when it comes to something like the United Nations, or excuse me, for NATO and any sort of organization like that. Like, yes, I get it. There is a genuine point to be made there. But there is some countries like Estonia that per capita spend more money on defense than America does. But when you're a much smaller nation, the overhead costs are a lot different on what you have to spend money on. So, there's all different points you can be made with a comparison like that. I get it. As for Ukraine itself and what I see for their future, whatever deal is being brokered right now with Marco Rubio and his dildo crew and the Russians, uh, it will not be agreed to by Ukraine, nor should they agree to whatever deal is proposed by the nation that invaded them and the nation that is, 6,000 miles that way. Zelensky's going to shoot this down. Ukraine is going to shoot this deal down because they had no part of it. They don't want to give any sort of concessions to Russia, nor should they. And next step will be, okay, we're going to pull all aid from Ukraine. No more Patriot systems, no more Abrams tanks, no more nothing. No more shells, no artillery, etc. Nothing. You're on your own. Which will then be in Europe's court to say, like, hey, how about we step up and start defending a European neighbor here? And one of my biggest criticisms right now with Europe is that their ability to mass produce arms, and something that could be ramped up over the past 3 years, has been negligible. Like, there should have been just a massive fury just to say, like, my God, Trump could get elected after Biden's term, and then all aid could be pulled, so we could prepare for this and take steps. And by fractionally, it's increased in Europe. Like, they don't appear to be taking this seriously, which again goes back to my point of Europe's constant resting on the laurels of America to protect democracies around the world is their ultimate downfall. Because they didn't take this seriously. Europe, for the most part. Like, I know there is things like the Czech initiative and whatnot that got millions of shells to Ukraine and all that. But when it comes to, like, the mass production facilities to get mass production off the ground, again, negligible. They had 3 years to help ramp up the arms industry in Europe, and it's been a negligible result. Because again, America has the resources to do this and can do this and can supply needs for democracies around the world. How's that look now? And it's just too late in the game. You can't just make artillery shell factories pop up overnight and any sort of just transport vehicle manufacturing like that make armored vehicles, etc., tanks, whatnot. That stuff, you just don't snap fingers and make stuff like that appear. So you have a democratic world that is relying on the machine of production that America is in the arms industry to bail out the democracies of the world, as I said. So where does that leave Ukraine if America does in fact pull everything? If America starts loosening sanctions against Russia? I ultimately still think Russia is screwed on a number of levels. Number one, they can't take Ukraine. Even if every ounce of arms was pulled from Ukraine and the war was continued, no concessions were made, no deal was struck, they cannot take Ukraine. Look what happened in the first days of war when they tried to take Kyiv. All those planes and aircraft and helicopters that came down to secure Hostomel Airport with guys on the ground with just machine guns and man pads, just very low-tech stuff, picking off helicopters left and right. sabotaging the runway of Hostomel Airport because that's what Russia needed to seize one of the airports right outside of Kyiv so they could land heavy cargo aircraft that could drop tanks and armored personnel carriers, stuff like that. All these elite commando forces that were sent into Kyiv to sack the capital, overtake Zelensky and his men, and have the rest of the country crumble from within because they would lose their principal controlling powers, their ways to dictate orders. What makes you think that Russia would stand a chance with the same technology at their disposal? And now a capital like Kyiv has 10 times the amount of air defense, 10 times the amount of tech than what they had at the start of the war. Russia is not going to take Ukraine. It just ain't happening. Their only chance to take it was in that first week or two of the war, and once that fell by the wayside, it was done. The ultimate falling of the entire country was done. The bombing of hospitals, apartment buildings, etc., is not taking the toll that Russia intends for it to take on the citizens of Ukraine. They're going to keep fighting. Blow up all the hospitals in Ukraine. They're still going to keep fighting. Those Cold War tactics of trying to make the society succumb because you're ruthless ain't happening now. Now, I can see Ukraine not getting territories back like the Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia areas, Crimea, all those areas that have been taken over by Russia. I can see them not getting that back, no matter how hard they fight or how long this war goes on. As for Russia itself, what do you think that, like, just because like a deal is brokered and denied by Ukraine, that America's just going to lift all the sanctions and just all these businesses that left and all this foreign investment that left is just going to magically apparate back in the country? That even if the war ends, you're going to have, hundreds of thousands of troops come back home and just magically find some place to work? That a country that in Russia that is now being propped up by a wartime economy, when that wartime economy ends and you still have over 20% interest rates, that people are going to be able to float in society, that their economy is going to prosper in any way, shape, or form? Like, every single analyst right now is spelling economic doom for Russia come springtime. Like, they are in serious shit that can't just be solved with this war ending or sanctions being lifted. The amount of damage that is being done every single night to Russia's biggest moneymaker, which is their oil industry, and all these drone strikes that happen literally every single night from Ukraine. And if that's one thing I could praise that this war has taken a turn to, is that Ukraine has mainly focused their efforts not so much on getting land back, but, one, taking land, like you're seeing in Kursk in Russia, and holding that land. I don't know if you want to use the word hostage, but just holding it as just as a commanding presence of we can take your stuff and keep it. Don't ever lose sight of that, Russia. To now, they're focusing their efforts again not on the reclamation of Ukrainian land, but sending these drone strikes to oil facilities, storage facilities, to processing plants. That is hurting Russia's bottom line every single night. And I honestly think that is one of the biggest reasons that is getting Russia to the negotiation table right now, because they don't want this war to end. Like I said, they're on a wartime economy right now. Ending that wartime economy and just bringing all those troops home and just trying to magically find jobs and keep society happy enough. Russia doesn't really want to necessarily take a chance with that, but man, the more and more of these oil processing plants and storage facilities that get hit is hitting the literal main artery of money that comes into this country. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about this. I'm still optimistic that Russia is going to have an ultimate, complete, and utter economic collapse. But I'm also fearful of what Ukraine's future is as well, because they're going to be abandoned by America even if this war ends. And you hear these deals that Trump is having for the earth minerals in the ground and whatnot, and I mean, I'm sure if this war ends, Donald Trump's going to show up and be like, oh, hey, you want to still do that deal now? And I hope Zelensky tells him to eat a dick, honestly. And as for the Americans suffering right now, and why I titled the video as it was, I look at things like, I know it may sound silly to compare America to like a sports team, but I often see when a sports team that I follow is doing bad, I want more bad things to happen to them because more bad things brings on more change. Okay? If you do the things like you pull out a few close wins or whatever, it just makes it, oh, you don't have to change too much. Things are kind of just, staying baseline. You don't have to get ridiculous. The more people suffer, the more change will be made. Okay? I want people to know that if you're going to vote for some tyrant like Donald Trump, who has a literal cartoon villain in the White House by his side with his little dorks looking through the books, creating this Department of Doge, which, by the way, is just something that shouldn't be something that happens, because anytime you create a department, it has to be approved by Congress. Congress didn't approve this shit. This Department of Efficiency, this is just, it's just something that Trump wants because he can give it to his boy Elon, who isn't even an American. And that's not trying to say oh, someone from outside of America can't possibly have a good mind for any sort of business in America. And not trying to sound like that. But for the whole make America great again and keep the immigrants out of this country, man, you got an immigrant looking through all the books here, looking through all the information with his little Tesla dorks, and they know everything. They're seeing everything. They're getting the chance to look at everything. And deep down inside, that bothers a lot of you MAGA guys if you really examine it. But you can't criticize it because you're blind to it. You're going to accept whatever Trump does because he is right and just. And you can't criticize it because he supports the guy with the R next to his name. So it's impossible. You can't possibly criticize that. So yeah, I want Americans to suffer. I want Americans to suffer at just the levels we haven't seen in the longest time, because I don't want to see someone like a Trump get elected again. So, Europe, closing thoughts here. Europe, step up if you care about Europe and democracy. The ball's in your court to support Ukraine now. And to the world, you should hate America right now, or maybe not necessarily hate it, but not support it, for lack of a better term. People like me, I have no ill will in my heart to someone in Canada, but man, you see just the amount of people that all of a sudden are anti-Canada and just anti this or that. Really? Just because that's the flavor of the day now? We're really going to jump on board with that. So, good luck, Ukraine. Screw you, Russia. Again, like I've said in my previous videos, this hits me a little bit different because I am someone of Russian descent. And seeing what my ancestry is doing, my ancestral nation, one of them, it sickens me. It sickens me. It sickens me to know that my grandmother left the Soviet Union to get away from this crap, and it's just the same old crap that was happening in her lifetime. Anyway, so Europe, good luck. Ukraine, good luck. Russia, may your economic downfall come sooner than anyone predicts. And China, good luck invading Taiwan, because that's next. That is all.